Bukele, there's a really interesting story in the New York Times a couple of days ago that about Bukele and about all these prisoners that the U.S. has deported to the El Salvadorian jail. So the Times is reporting about negotiations that Bukele had with the United States. Now, remember who Bukele is. Bukele is the president of El Salvador. He came to power and really had a pretty unremarkable first couple of years until he decided to basically do everything he could to clamp down on violence. Initially, when he came into power, he negotiated deals with the gangs to reduce violence in El Salvador. When he realized that was not working, he basically endorsed a plan that went out there, sent out the military and the police, and arrested anybody who had drug-related tattoos. Tens of thousands of people were arrested. He also built massive prisons. Everybody was arrested, and then they had these mass trials to try to figure out who was and who wasn't. But in the meantime, everybody was incarcerated. There was no innocent until proven guilty, anything like that. He literally arrested huge numbers of El Salvadorian citizens and put them in jail. And then kind of try to sort it out after the fact. And again, proof of membership in a gang was tattoos. Is that familiar to anybody? Familiar? Yeah. This is the policy that Donald Trump is mimicking. In order to do this, he declared a state of emergency, put the troops out into the streets, and incarcerated, again, tens of thousands of people, many of them innocent. And, for what it seems like is going to be very long periods of time. The consequence of this is predictable. If you take the male population of any country and you incarcerate a significant proportion of them, you will see a decline in violent crime. Violent crime is a male phenomenon. Women do not, generally commit violent crimes. Violent crimes are primarily male, committed by men. I don't know what the percentage is, but it's large. So if you lock men up, violent crime goes down. Indeed, in El Salvador, it went from the highest murder rate in the world to like a pretty bad U.S. city, but just a U.S. city. So not that bad. As a consequence, Bukele became unbelievably popular. He then, in spite of the Constitution limiting his term of president in El Salvador to only one term, he then ran for a second term. Does that sound familiar? I've seen Trump is selling these Trump 2028 hats already. So, Trump is learning from Bukele. Anyway, he ran and he won in a landslide because he had made El Salvador much safer. He is also, out there blaming higher prices on grocery departments. He is an authoritarian when it comes to the economy. He is a central planner. He is a real authoritarian in El Salvador. The people so far love him because of the reduction in crime rates, but he's also far, far, far from being a capitalist. For a while, people raved about him because he embraced Bitcoin and made it legal tender in the country. But the reality is that the El Salvadoran economy is not doing well, has not done well even under his rule. And therefore, they needed a large loan for El Salvador, a large loan, in order to keep the country going. And in order to do that, the IMF required that he basically rescind legal tender status from Bitcoin, which he did a couple of months ago. Anyway, Bukele is a statist authoritarian who cares nothing for individuals or individual rights, but who has been able to achieve certain level of a reduction or significant level of reduction in crime in El Salvador. And he gets a lot of credit for that. Anyway, he has built these massive jails. They have some spare space. So the Trump administration went down to negotiate with Bukele in order to send deportees from the United States to El Salvador. What was interesting is that Bukele, when the Trump advisors approached him, was worried. You know, he really wanted to make sure that the people being sent down were actually criminals, that they were actually convicted, they were actually gang members. Surprisingly, he did not want to take Americans or American illegal immigrants, whose only crime was being in the United States illegally. He said, "I'll jail convicted criminals, but not just illegals." And part of that was a worry of how it would look at home. A lot of Salvadorians have relatives who are illegal immigrants in the United States, and they don't want to see their relatives, and they don't view going to America illegally as a crime justifying being in an El Salvadorian horrific high security jail. I guess only Americans think that being an illegal in America justifies such treatment. El Salvadorians don't. So he couldn't really convince his own people that it was in their self-interest for the United States to be dumping U.S. deportees in his jails. So he told the Americans that he really if he was willing to do it, but only if they showed him proof that these people were actually gang members and convicted a criminal. He wanted evidence. Of course, once they started deporting people into the jails, the U.S. officials had problems gathering the evidence. For one, most of the people who were sent to El Salvador jail were not convicted criminals. So they came up with a scorecard that the Homeland Security Department created, which assigned kind of points for different attributes. So if you have a lot of tattoos, you got 4 points. If you had other, attributes that linked you somehow to gang membership, you got other points. If you scored more than 8 points, tattoos plus something else, like somebody said or somebody reported you as, then you were considered a gang member. And then they promised him an invitation to the White House to have a visit with Trump. And those two things seem to have convinced Bukele to take on the deportees and to accept them in spite of the fact that they are not convicted criminals. He was willing because the U.S. labeled them violent criminals, and this way he could stay, close to Trump. So even though at the meeting with Trump in front of the reporters, Bukele took a very tough stance. He's not returning anybody. He's happy to take the deportees. These are violent criminals and so on and so forth. He himself had some real doubts about all of this. Now imagine a world in which a dictator of a small Central American country who has extra jail space has doubts about the people that the United States is imprisoning in his jails, but the United States, the American administration, responsible for protection of the rights of people who reside in America, has no problem with it. So, yep. It's impractical to give 21 million people a trial, so what? Let's just shoot them. What the hell? Let's just shoot them. They're not human beings because we can't give them a trial. They're just overwhelming us with numbers. So we're going to send them to an El Salvadorian jail instead. Shooting them is a little brutal. El Salvadorian jails, that's a much better environment for them. That's okay. It's just unbelievable the disregard so many Americans now have for the lives of individual people, for the lives of people who want to live in America, who risk their lives and much of their fortune to come and live in America. So what the hell? They're here illegally. Oh my God. This is one of the biggest criminal activities one can engage in entering the United States without a visa. And therefore, we can't shoot them. We'd like to shoot them, can't shoot them. So we'll send them to a brutal and Salvadorian jail. It really is pretty pathetic that this is the state of America. I can understand, okay, they broke the law, just like everybody else breaks the law. You put them in front of a judge and you try them, and the penalties are not that big. You deport them, you don't put them in a jail. But we now, because of what's happened over the last 10 years, because over the last 10 years, led by Trump, intellectuals on the right have basically dehumanized illegal immigrants. They're now not fully human. They certainly have no individual rights. They have no rights. Now it's okay to just round them up, and send them to jails or deport them to countries where they're going to be treated horrifically and put back in jail. Send them back to a place like Venezuela, which is a socialist hellhole. What the hell? They're not human. That's what kind of the Trump and the right's new rhetoric basically suggests to all of us. So really horrific. It's just disgusting. The way we are treating human beings, and so un-American, so un-American, so the opposite of what you would expect Americans to be. So they've lost their status as individuals because they're illegal. We treat criminals in America better than we do them because criminals in America get a trial. Immigration is the topic that, it's so upsetting because we're talking about human beings. And we're talking about human beings. So if you're a U.S. citizen, you have rights. And if you're not a U.S. citizen, you don't have rights. If you ever read the Declaration of Independence, we'll get to Donald Trump's interpretation of the Declaration of Independence in a minute. But if you've ever read the Declaration of Independence, it says all men are created equal. All men. It doesn't say citizens. It says they're all endowed with inalienable rights. The right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Nowhere there does it say citizen. Nowhere there does it say American. Nowhere there does it say any of that. It says all men are created equal. All of them. But to expect anybody to take the Declaration of Independence seriously, it is just bizarre. They're inside the United States. As soon as you step into the United States, the job of the U.S. government, the only frigging job of the U.S. government is to protect your rights. Whether you're legal, illegal, or otherwise. Now, you can be then accused of violating laws and, brought in front of a court or whatever, but you don't lose your right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness because you crossed the border. You don't lose your right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness because you're illegal. You're a human being. And if you'd actually look at some of these human beings, if you'd actually look at why they come to the United States, what they went through in order to get to the United States, you would be, if you were a human being, you would be ashamed of your attitude around illegal immigrants because, what would you do if you were born in an El Salvadorian hellhole? Would you not try to get into the United States? And given that it's impossible for you to get in legally, would you not get in illegally? And what would your moral status be if you didn't try? Like, it's almost like I could say, it's almost like it would be immoral not to try to get into the United States illegally, because then you're not pursuing your life. But you who are the beneficiaries, some of you who are the beneficiaries of living in the United States by accident or birth, you can sit here and, oh, they're illegal. They should be sent to a jail in El Salvador.